Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Bach Preludes. Today we'll be talking about the D minor Prelude, which you might actually know. It starts like this. It's kind of hard for me to stop playing it. As usual, we'll be talking about the piece itself, how to practice it, and finally how to learn it. So let's dive right into it. This prelude, I would say, is a right banger of a piece. And the reason for it is something pretty modern, which is just a monster bass line. Let's just show some of these bass lines. For example, here. Or here in this funky breakdown. Or over here in the actual breakdown. It's just non-stop. Every part of this piece has this really prominent bass line, which I think, especially on a modern piano, or any piano that can have this rich, thick, just very monster sound of a bass line, this piece is going to sound amazing. There's not too much more I can say about this. I love this piece and this bass line so much. But besides this bass, which is I think the heartblood of this piece, there is more things going on. So this right hand doing these arpeggios, these in large part these arpeggios highlight a bunch of chords. But no matter how you play it, whether, let's say, you're just playing chords, or you're playing the way it's written as arpeggios, the main element remains this bass line, this beautiful monster bass line. And I think it's interesting and important to recognize that the harmony, the chords, what the right hand does is not propped up by the bass. It's actually the other way around. I think in Bach especially, just the rhythm, which is often really driven by the bass, is the main element, is the thing that we respond to. No matter what you do with your right hand, this piece is going to really hit home because of this very nice bass line. So actually, the right hand supports the bass, not the other way around. So really lock into that, this really nice, amazing bass line here, no matter what goes on with the right hand, however you play it. Now, the next thing I want to talk about in this piece is this interesting misalignment, this rhythmic ambiguity, to use a phrase. Well, ambiguity is something Leonard Bernstein said quite a lot in this very interesting, I think 6-part series that's televised and available, I think, on YouTube as well. I'll link it below. He loves ambiguity, a little too much in my opinion. But let's talk about the ambiguity, this rhythmic unalignment that we see here. Okay, we have this bass line. But over this bass line are these arpeggios. Bop 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 bum bop bop bum bop bop bum 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 bum. And in fact, for every one note in the bass, we're going to be playing 3 notes in the right hand in these arpeggios. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay? Throughout this entire piece, every note in the bass has 3 notes in the right hand. Now I'm counting this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm counting it like that, and the 1 falls on this bass note. That's pretty important. It really emphasizes that every time we hear this bass, it's like the start of that group of 3. And our body really is in tune with that. Even if you're not counting it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, if you're just doing pums the way I did now, you really accentuate the first pum, the 1 of every group of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, we feel the bass as the start, every bass note as the start of a group of 3. Okay, where's this ambiguity? In the right hand, we also have these groups of 3s, okay? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Why am I counting it 1, 2, 3 like this? Why am I choosing the 1 where I'm choosing it? Well, notice how every group of 3 in the right hand has like a high note, a middle note, a low note. Really brief interlude. What do I mean when I say high and low? Think of like a high-pitched voice versus a very low, thick, low-pitched voice. So as we rise, as we move up on the keyboard here, the notes get higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. As we go down, as we fall, the notes get lower and lower and lower. So when I use a phrase like the rise and fall of a melody, which I said in the previous prelude, that's what I mean. We rise as in we go higher up in pitch, or we go lower, we fall, we go down in pitch. I know this may seem a little obvious, but I remember reading, I'm not sure where, that the majority of the terms that we, especially as musicians, use to describe music are not very obvious and intuitive. Maybe low and high is intuitive because we talk about low-pitched voice versus a high-pitched voice, but maybe not. In any case, this is what I mean by the rise and fall and by a high note, a middle note, and a low note. So this right hand, throughout the entire piece, the groups of 3 in the right hand follow this pattern. High, middle, low, high, middle, low, high, middle, low, high, middle, low. Okay? That was a group. You see, every group falls down. High, middle, low, high, middle, low, high, middle, low, high, middle, low. So when I count this as 1, 2, 3, I'm saying that 1 at the beginning of every group, at that high point, okay? We feel like every group starts on this high note and ends on the low note. It's a shape that I think we're very in tune with. We're starting high and we're falling down. You see? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So where is this ambiguity, this unalignment? Well, if we count together the 1, 2, 3 of the bass, 1, 2, 3, and the 1, 2, 3 of the right hand of these arpeggios, ba ba bum ba ba bum, they don't align. They're not like this. They're actually like, hold on a second. They're like this, okay? We start the 1 of the right hand, and then in the middle of the movement of the right hand, in the middle of this high, middle, low, that's where the bass falls in. Let me count the right hand. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. You hear how that bass falls in the middle. Alternatively, if I were to count the bass, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and now adding in the right hand, you'll see how the right hand does not start on the bass note. Here's the bass, we feel it, this pulse, this bum, 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 bum. But now we're gonna start the right hand, not on the beat. So that's this ambiguity, this unalignment that I'm talking about. We have the bass, which pulls us in one direction, and we have the right hand, which pulls us in another direction. Now, really what we're mostly attuned to is the bass. It's the one that really makes us want to dance, makes us move. We feel it a lot more. So that's really the rhythm that we're feeling the most. However, because the right hand starts a little off kilter, it kind of pulls us in a different direction. So we have this strange off-kilter feeling that reminds me of something Robert Christgau said about one of my favorite bands, The Replacements, that good rock and roll, let me paraphrase, good rock and roll makes you feel like it's falling apart, but it's put together only enough so that it doesn't fall apart, just like held together by a single thread. That's the feeling that I get with this piece as well, especially in this section over here, right before the breakdown, where we have this loopy bass. It just feels like it's almost falling apart, but it's held together just a little bit. And I think that's because of this ambiguity, this unalignment that I talked about between the bass and what the right hand does. There is one more ambiguity, unalignment, that I want to talk about. It's harder to feel, and I wonder how important it is. Are measures important? That's for musicians out there jumping the gun a little bit. So let's talk about this last ambiguity. First of all, for the musicians who know what resolutions and measures are, the ambiguity that I'm talking about is that Bach, in this prelude, but in almost all of the preludes, oftentimes there are resolutions in the middle of a measure. Instead of falling at the beginning of a measure, which is usually where it happens, it's in the middle. Let me explain for the people who don't know what those terms are, what this means. A resolution is pretty simple. You've felt resolutions. We're in the key of D minor. If we go here, we've resolved. From this chord, did you feel that resolution, that we landed home? We started in D minor, we moved to this different chord, and that chord pulls us back home over here. That's what a resolution is, when we land back home. Now, what's a measure? Just really, okay, I'll explain what a measure is, but again, I'm jumping the gun a little bit for my musician friends out there. I'm starting to wonder, is it really obvious that measures exist? Are they real? Let me first explain what a measure is. You can see it here in the sheet music, and in almost all, I think almost all Western music is pretty clearly delineated by measures. So if we look at this sheet music over here, we see these vertical lines, and we see that this piece is broken up into equal sections. These are called measures. So every measure is equal in that it has the same number of beats, should really have the same amount of time, as long as you're not shifting how rapid or how slow you play a piece. Every measure should kind of come out to be about the same number of seconds. It's pretty obvious looking at these notes where the measures are equal. You can see that there are 8 of these bass notes in every single measure. And you can count these measures. You can say that every measure has 4 beats. Let's count them. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. So that's what a measure is. I don't know if it's something that you necessarily feel as a listener. It is crucial for the craftsmanship of playing music, especially when playing with other people. Crucial to talk about measures. But I did start to wonder if a listener actually feels these measures. Let's come back to that in a moment. But briefly, now that you know what a measure is and what a resolution is, the ambiguity that talked about here is that the resolutions happen in the middle of a measure. Usually we feel it at the beginning of a measure. So to use the example that we had previously, over here, 2, 3, 4, 1. Let's do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. We land home at the beginning of the measure, usually. In this piece, we don't. And I started to wonder, is that important? How important even is that? Are measures even something that we feel? Now, this is something that I'm sure has been studied, and in some future episodes, I'll return to this topic because it happens so often in these Bach preludes for the resolutions that happen in the middle of measures. But right now, just spitballing, I do feel like we as listeners do kind of tune in to measures. I'll give you an example in rock music, pop music, anything with drums. A very simple drum line would be like bass, snare, bass, snare, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the 1, we hit a cymbal, 3, 4. Bass and cymbal, snare, bass, snare. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, and so on. I think when that happens, we kind of get attuned and we expect that, oh, okay, every 4 beats, every 4 times that we move our body, we're going to hear that cymbal, and something happens there. And that way we kind of realize that, okay, there is a measure. We have 4 beats, and every 4 beats something happens, like that cymbal gets hit. And I think our bodies, whether we're conscious of it or not, start to expect that something's going to happen every 4 beats. So maybe measures are actually something that we feel. Usually, I've said that we resolve on the 1 at the start of a measure. So for example, we might get, what's the word, like Pavlov's dog, we get trained to expect that every 4 beats we're going to hear a resolution. So for example, 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1. We've resolved. Let's continue. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Did you feel how we resolved? We landed home on the 1. The more this happens throughout the piece, the more I think we get attuned to expecting that on the 1 we're going to have a resolution. So then as soon as Bach doesn't give that to us, it just feels odd. So for example, at the beginning over here, let me do something that I like to do, which is to really emphasize the 1 so that we really feel like something does happen at the beginning of the measure. I'm going to help the listener feel the measures by emphasizing the 1. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Now the resolution does not fall on the 1. Let's play that again with the chords. The resolution, just so you can hear it, will be from here. It's easier to notice if I change the voicing. Okay, that's the resolution. That falls on the 2. Let's count this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. See, we've resolved on the 2. And I think if we expect to resolve on the 1, maybe because we were emphasizing the 1 in every single measure, the start of the measure, it throws us off a little bit. But I do wonder how much we actually feel this and how much is it just something I think about because I see the way Bach wrote this. I'm not sure. We will explore it more in some other episodes. Hello folks, Future Dan here. I can't believe I actually forgot to talk about, and even write in my script, another ambiguity which is super important. It's almost as important as that first one that we talked about, that misalignment of the left hand and the right hand. So this is I would say it's both a harmonic and a rhythmic ambiguity. Let's take a look at it in the context of this section over here. remember that first ambiguity that we talked about, where we have this pattern of high, middle, low, high, middle, low, high, middle, low, but that doesn't align with the left hand. The bass that really drives this piece comes in the middle of that high, middle, low. High, middle, low. Okay. However, harmonically, the chords that get spelled out for each one of these notes, the chords don't matter, but I mean, they are there. It's like an F major, A minor, it's a B half diminished, E to an A. The chords that get spelled out actually use the three notes that are played during the bass note. Continuing with this high, middle, low pattern that I talked about, it'd be like this. Middle, low, high. This spells out one chord. Middle, low, high. This spells out another. Middle, low, high. Middle, low, high. And we resolve. So the chords that get spelled out include the beginning, the high, of the next group of three notes. So this is like a group of three notes. But the harmony, the chord that gets spelled out, uses two notes here and then the next note of this next group of three, right? Okay, I've ended my group of high, middle, low. Now we're starting the next group of high, middle, low. High, middle, low. Now we're starting the next group of high, middle, low. But when we feel this harmonically, when we feel this progression of very nice sounding chords, every chord gets built by these two notes, middle and low, and then the high, the beginning of the next group of three notes in the right hand. It's much easier to see on the sheet music. As much as I dislike showing the sheet music, there are certain things that are, I find, easier to see visually than talk about in words. I struggled writing this part of this script and this ambiguity because it is kind of hard to talk about. But visually, it's pretty clear. We can see all these ambiguities, these three notes, high, middle, low, that don't get aligned with the bass note, as well as harmonically, where every chord is spelled out using a combination, two notes from one group of three, followed by the first note of the next group of three. Very interesting. It permeates pretty much this entire piece and adds to another layer of ambiguity where our body is kind of pulled in different directions and adds to this topsy-turvy, kind of loopy, apocalyptic, everything's falling apart feel of this piece. Okay, back to the regular scheduled programming. So that's it for what I want to say about this piece. Let's talk about practicing. Let me turn on this light. I think the second time I'm recording this, and the light has changed. Yeah, that's decent. Okay. How to practice this? First off, let me start off by saying that I was going to say that this isn't that hard of a piece, but I'm sure I've mentioned this before. Everything is hard. Even a bass line, even playing this intro, repeating this one note over and over again and making this sound decent. That's not easy. I'm assuming that if you're watching this and you're trying to learn this piece, you at least are advanced enough that you can play a melody nice. And conversely, you can play a bass melody. I don't know why I put that in quotes. You can play the bass and make it sound pretty nice. Boom, 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 boom. If you've gotten to that point, the only difficult thing here is a little bit in the right hand, even though arpeggios are building blocks, always sing your scales and your arpeggios. Even though they are building blocks, they move so fast in this piece, it might be a little hard. So we'll talk about some tips to how to practice them. But besides that technical aspect, the difficult thing in practicing this piece is dealing with those ambiguities, those rhythmical ambiguities. And my only tip for that, it's not a tip, it's a law. In this piece, let the bass lead. Always, always, always feel the bass. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4. The bass is the most important part. As long as you feel that bass, you've really ingrained it in you. You can feel that every time it starts a measure, the ambiguities kind of fall into place. Even when you do something that's a little difficult, which is to emphasize different notes in every group of 3 in the right hand. So every arpeggio, as I said, has like a high, middle, low, high, middle, low. And the high note is actually right before the beat. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Well, sometimes you have to emphasize a different note in that arpeggio. We'll see this a bit later when we talk about how to learn this piece. But there are nice little movements in thirds between, say, like the high part of these arpeggios and the bass. I mean, look at this here. We have a G minor chord. Check this out. You see how we've held on to these 2 notes, this G and this B flat, but with the high note of the arpeggios, we have the same movement as in the bass. Emphasizing those notes that don't fall on the beat of the bass becomes much easier as long as you've ingrained that bass in you and you feel it. So let the bass lead. That's really the point. The technical part is playing these arpeggios fast, as I mentioned. At some level, because the arpeggio is a building block, you just need to do this by yourself, with your teacher. It's up to you. But I felt like it's worth maybe giving you some tips that I've used to get my arpeggios a little bit better. I mentioned this a little bit, I believe, in the first episode, but let me go into a bit more detail. Let's pick this, not D minor, let's pick F major, the F major scale. And let's pick the first chord, okay? F major, a basic building block, a regular old triad. There are so many ways you can make these 3 notes sound beautiful, sound good. So many ways. You could go up like that. You could go up, but go down in volume, start loud, and get soft. You could do the same thing staccato. You could make the first 2 notes together, and then the last one staccato. You can make the first one staccato, and the last 2 legato. You can start with the middle note, go up, and then down. Middle, up, down. Or the other way around. Middle, down, up, middle, down, up. So many ways. Just use your imagination. Play around with all the different ways you can bind these 3 notes together. A technical thing that I found very, very useful, especially for chords, is as you're practicing these arpeggios, hold down 1 note and work on the other 2. This it lets you understand, how do I utilize these 2 muscles of these 2 fingers while this other muscle is holding down a note. Continue. Let's use the middle finger, hold it down the note, and use these other 2 fingers. Of course, I could play staccato or legato. And continue. The last one would be holding on to this note with the pinky and use these other 2 fingers to play. do this with every chord in this key. Do this with the left hand as well. Do this in all the keys. And if you add this to your daily scales and your arpeggios, God bless those Aristocats. Actually, God bless whoever wrote that song. That's a really fun song. I forget who. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Always play your scales and your arpeggios. So if you do this, this piece will kind of fall into place. There's nothing too weird about these arpeggios. Maybe a couple of places where the fingering is a little odd, but otherwise, if you just get your arpeggios down, you'll be able to play this piece. That reminds me, try with different fingerings as well. I showed you the most basic fingering of 1, 3, 5. 1, 2, 4 is another very common fingering. 1, 2, 3, especially if you need your pinky for something else like playing an octave higher. Yeah, so just play your scales and your arpeggios. I mentioned fingering. I will point it out just over here. There's a very funky part. Here, I found this is a weird fingering because you've got these. I'm playing an arpeggio here with 2, 4, 5, and then 1, 3, 5. And it's a little awkward because this pinky is down here, and then I have to bring it up here to this E flat. So this is the only fingering, the only part that I found a little odd and really required practicing a lot. You see, the trick there was over here. Once we landed on this D minor, I'm using my 5 here on this F, and I have to come down on this D with the 4, the ring finger. That's just for me. Maybe for you there's other parts that are a little funky fingering wise, but for the most part I find it pretty natural as long as you play your scales and your arpeggios. Okay, that's it for how to practice this piece. Let's talk about how to learn it. In the previous episodes we learned the pieces as essentially a bunch of chords. We're not going to do that here, just a little bit. And I also want to say something I should have emphasized more in the previous episodes. The harmonic analysis, knowing which chords you're playing, is mostly just a tool that helps you memorize a piece, or maybe lets you understand how the piece works. I'm not saying harmony is not important. I know I harp on rhythm a lot because I do think it is more important, and I like it more mostly. But I'm not trying to say harmony is not important. Harmony is important, okay? A 2-5-1 sounds amazing no matter how you play it. But harmony is not everything. The sound of your instrument, what the bass does, the shape of your arpeggios, even though they are just spelling out chords, there's still a shape to the way you're playing them. The voicing, just everything, much more than just the harmony. So use harmony as a tool to help you memorize a piece, but realize it's not everything, but it is very useful. We're not going to go through the piece measure by measure because it's a little cumbersome. And not cumbersome, it would just take a while. Let me show you the tips that I think are most useful for this piece. We talked about harmony. Let's start with harmony. The most important thing that you should keep in mind with this piece and harmony-wise is we're in D minor. Since we're in D minor, the next important thing you should know is your dominant chord. This is the 5th, right? The chord built on the 5th degree, and because we're in a minor key, instead of it being an A minor, we have A major. This is so that this C sharp here that we've sharped, lands very quickly on this D. Otherwise, if you play a regular A minor, as you would playing the notes from this key, it doesn't sound as resolved as this. So every time you see a C sharp here in the notes, you should be thinking, oh, okay, that's my A chord, that's my dominant, my 5th. That's going to let me resolve to the 1 chord, to D minor. And there's another harmonic thing that Bach does here quite a lot. There's like this ambiguity, similarity between a bunch of chords that are related to this dominant, to this A. Let's look at it right at the beginning. Let's try to apply our old harmonic analysis to the beginning and see where it fails. So at the beginning, we've outlined this D minor chord, right? We're in D minor. That's something you should know. And the first thing he does is he goes like this. Do you see those notes? And now we've landed back in D minor. When we look at these notes, you might be tempted to say, okay, well, that's like a G minor, that's the 4 chord. This is like the 2 chord, an E diminished. And this is, well, it's missing the A, but it's pretty clear that this is kind of like a dominant, your A7, which resolves to D minor. And that would be fine. You can look at it like that. You can say, okay, I'm starting in D minor, then I'm doing G minor, E diminished, A7, back to the 1. But actually, I start to wonder, is this really a G minor? Or should we be counting this E as well? Is it actually an E half diminished? If we rearrange the notes, is it actually a G minor with a 6th? Should we even talk about G minor and E diminished? Is it simply this A? Look, if we make the A chord, make it a 7, keep adding notes, this would be like an A11 flat 9, I guess. Yeah. Which one of these is it? I think they're all fine. They all make sense. You can look at it in any way. Me personally, all I think about is, okay, I'm starting in D minor, and now I'm going to kind of do this funky thing where I'm outlining this big chord that kind of contains G minor, E, this half diminished chord, the A. They're all kind of similar, and they all pull us back towards D minor. So I know that I'm repeating this bass note, and I know I have this shape over here that kind of outlines this funky chord. And I'm no longer thinking about, am I playing G minor, E diminished, and so on. So our old tool of just thinking of chord kind of falls down because of these ambiguities. There's another place over here in this breakdown. Like here, we're pretty clearly in G minor, but actually, now we're in A. This looks like an A major. But now we're kind of on the E diminished. And again, maybe it is correct to view this as G minor, A major, E diminished. Maybe that is correct, but me personally, I don't really view it that way. I'm mostly just thinking of what the bass does, and I know that the right hand is going to follow these similarities between all of these chords. Okay, the next tool that I want to talk about is following the thirds. Oh, before that, I forgot to mention this. By far the most important thing, by far, to learning this piece is knowing the bass. This is the 3rd time I've mentioned that the bass is so important. If you memorize the bass, you've almost memorized the piece. The rest really falls into place. So memorize the bass. Let's talk about these patterns. Actually, before the thirds, let's talk about following a pattern. Right after this beginning, okay, where we've landed back on D minor, look what happens. This is pretty clearly a D minor, and this a G minor. Okay, so we're going from D minor to G minor. Now the next thing that happens, I don't really memorize the next chords so much as I know that I'm doing the same thing but one whole step lower. So I did this to this. Now I'm gonna do C major to F major. You see how it's the same pattern, but we've moved down one whole step. These patterns help so much to memorizing the piece. immediately in the next section, we're once again following a pattern. Look what the right hand does. I'm going to play the left hand as well, but focus on the right hand. This is like a G minor. This is like an A minor. It doesn't matter so much what the chord is, but notice how we've moved up. We've got the same 7th chord, but we've moved up in the scale. We continue. Once again, we've just moved up in the scale. If you follow the notes of the D minor scale, that's all we're doing. That's all we've done. Just follow the pattern of very, very useful trick. Even if so you don't have to memorize, okay, I'm doing D minor to G minor, then C major to F major, then like a B flat, G minor, C major, A minor, so on and so forth. There's so many chords. It's easier to think of it as patterns. Repeat, and now, pattern, repeat. Keep going up, keep going up. And now we've landed into the next pattern. So patterns, 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 very important. There's more patterns in this piece. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll leave it for you as an exercise. The next section, for example, also follows a pattern. I'll leave it for you. Let's move on to the next part, these following the thirds, as I mentioned. What do I mean by this? Let's look at it here in the almost next part, next part. Okay, we've landed in G minor. We're still in G minor, but look what happens once we move up to a C in the bass. We're going to hold on to these 2 notes in the right hand for these arpeggios. But this note, this D, moves up to an E. And we continue. We're going to hold on to these 2 notes, and while the bass moves up to the next note, the pinky also moves up here, and then here. Let's look at it again. Do you see how they move up together? Let's add the arpeggios. Let me accent them even more. You see that? This is what I mean by the thirds. I do say thirds. I know they don't look like thirds, but if you take this bass note, you move it up an octave, it's a little more obvious that they're thirds. This is all throughout the piece. I'll give you just one more example and leave the rest as an exercise over here in this breakdown. Once again, we're in G minor. What is that flurry of notes? We're in G minor. Hold on to these 2 notes, this G and this B flat, and let's take a look at what the bass does with the other note. Let's play with the arpeggios. Again, they're thirds because let's bring up this bass note an octave higher. Do you see the thirds? Whoops. To here. That's why I say thirds. Almost throughout this whole piece, if it's not a small harmonic analysis like we mentioned, it's these patterns, it's these thirds. So with these 3 tricks, I think you can much more easily memorize this piece, which is actually pretty hard. I find it quite difficult to memorize it and play it and not get lost. It requires an enormous amount of concentration, despite it being a pretty easy piece, all things considered. I guess it's not an easy piece if it's hard to maintain the concentration as you play it, to really stay locked in. Oh, the last thing, actually there is one more pattern I want to mention. It's in this section over here where we're landed on A minor. What's this flurry of notes? As usual, the bass is the leader here. We're landed on A minor. We've got an A in the bass. We move up an octave, and then we fall down 3 notes. Move down an octave, fall down 3 notes. Move up an octave, fall down 3 notes. Move up an octave, fall down 3 notes. So what chords are we spelling out as we do this? Well, notice how when we fall down to 3 notes, we're landed on F, right? That means we want to resolve to F major. We do that with a 4, 5, 1. So in the key of F major, our 4 chord is B flat major, our 5 chord is C, and we go to the 1. And sure enough, that's what we have here. It sounds funky because the bass note on that 4 chord, it's not a B flat, it's an A. So this is actually a B flat major 7, but it's still a 4, 5, 1. Next, in this little pattern here, we move to a D. We want to resolve to D minor. What's 4, 5, 1 in D minor? G, A, D minor. Again, we move to B flat. So we want to resolve to B flat. What's the 4 chord in B flat? Well, that's E flat. What's the 5 chord in B flat? F major to the 1. I'll leave the last one for you to figure out, right? We're landing on G. We want to resolve to G minor. What's the 4 chord in G minor? What's the 5 chord? And then to G minor. Another pattern that you can just follow. Instead of memorizing all of these notes, I mean, I'm not thinking A minor, what was this? B flat, major 7, C7, F major, G7, A7, D minor. No, I've memorized the bass. I know I'm moving down here, and the rest just kind of falls into place. Oh, okay, I'm doing a 4, 5, 1. 4, 5, 1. 4, 5, 1. I messed it up. What was it? 4, 5, 1. Ah, yes. You can see how important muscle memory also becomes in this. 4, 5, 1 in the key of G minor. I know I said I'll let you do it. You can pause it now if you don't want me to give the answer. So this would be C major, D major, G minor. So patterns, follow the thirds, a bit of harmonic analysis because we're in D minor, and memorize that bass line. So that's it for how to learn this piece. What else is left? To play the piece. Let's do it. Dare we do it? Dare we try this in one take? I dare, but let's see if it comes out. Okay.